Welcome to Sykes Peak. Today we're going to talk about boundaries. So we had to break this one up into another session. So here's the continuation of that last session that we had. What we have to do is, as parents, we know what the good stuff is. We know what the bad stuff is. We know how far is too far. We have to monitor. We can't just leave them unmonitored. We can't just leave them on their own.
You don't throw them in the woods and say, see you on the other side. See you on the other side. Right.
Yeah. It's, but, as a kid, that's all we did was play in the woods. My wife, all she did was play in the water. She's from Florida. They have a whole different set of problems when they're playing in the water in Florida. And she had her encounters with snakes and with alligators. I remember the first time I went, and we went to her home in Florida, and we went swimming in the lake. And the whole time I was like, I was constantly aware, looking for alligators, because I knew I was going to be alligator food or something, but see, she didn't have the fear of the alligators. Now we go to my stomping grounds were the mountains, and I have a respect for bears, but I'm not as fearful as them as what she is.
Mm-hmm.
Although she looks at them as big furry dogs, and would set a bag of dog food out in the woods for them,
right.
And I have to keep her from doing that. But the point is that with small kids, you have to monitor what is happening, and you have to say, no, you can't touch that, or no, you don't grab that, because this is what's going to happen. This is going to this is going to hurt you, or it's going to harm you.
Yes.
And so when you have that explanation with them,
right.
If you touch that, it's hot. It will burn your finger.
Right.
Well, they don't know what burn your finger is at 2 and 3 years old until they burn their finger. So they don't have that experience.
Right.
Where we have that experience, and climbing a ladder. My middle child was fearless when it came to like climbing, climbing stuff.
Right.
And I was on the roof one day, and my mother was, working with on the ground, because I was sweeping stuff off her roof.
Right.
And she was raking it up on the ground and keeping an eye on my 2-year-old daughter.
Right.
And while she's keeping an eye on my 2-year-old daughter, she is, but she was focused more on raking this stuff up that was coming off the roof. And the next thing I hear is, "Hi, Daddy." And I turn around and look, my 2-year-old's coming up over the end of the ladder at a 15-foot, level, because my parents' house was on a hill. On the side that I climbed up on, it was about 15 feet. On the other side, it was only about 8 feet. And so, I didn't scream or yell or holler or, what are you doing on the ladder? I can't believe, I didn't go that route. I just said, "Hi, baby." I said, "Be careful," and,
right.
And because, she was confident in herself to be able, she'd been climbing out of her baby bed for, almost, 9 months. And here she is at 2 years old, coming up and over in that ladder. Now, my grandson, he won't get in his, my wife has secured 4 modes of operation, or 4 modes of transportation for him. He has a scooter. He has a little truck that he can scoot around on. He has a tricycle, and he has one of those electric cars.
Oh, yeah.
He won't get in the electric car. It scares him.
Oh.
Okay. So it just scares him. And so, so my daughter, and that's how my firstborn was.
Mm-hmm.
He was, he had issues of not trying stuff. He would be afraid to try stuff.
More cautious.
Yeah, and that's how firstborns are. Secondborns, secondborns are wide open.
Yeah,
because they've watched the firstborn.
Yeah. Well, me and my sister were the opposite.
Yeah, well,
That's why for other reasons, many other reasons.
Well, that's part of living in 21 countries too. But
and that actually does bring something up. The cultural differences growing up. A lot of people, I think kids growing up will relate to. I remember before we went overseas, it was I go in so-and-so's house and they could have sugar cereal in the mornings, and my mom was more health conscious for us as kids to make sure that we didn't get too much sugar in our diet, but. They would get sugared cereals and they would have sugared snacks, and it was just, candy whenever they wanted it. I want to my friend's house. I can load up on them that sugar, but then cultures have their different boundaries and limitations. The Middle East has gender boundaries and very strict ones. And then Europe, when I was living there, quite the opposite. That was culture shock. That was from almost one extreme to another. And it's not just freedom restricting. It's a understanding about how to go through life well. Germans don't they don't like noise in the community, and so there's I don't know if it's actually a technical law or if it's just an understanding of certain times of night when it starts getting dark. You just don't use your horn, and in the Middle East, it's horn all the time.
Right.
The second the light turns green, you lay on that horn. And in Germany, it's like, if you use your horn, someone must be dying.
Yeah.
You're right. And these are just, cultural norms that we have, these boundaries that are sometimes just understood in the background. But I do think when we're talking about child rearing, right, and trying to help parents, it needs to be intentional. It needs to have those goals, and that those boundaries are there to help the ball. Again, that bowling analogy, help that ball get to the pins.
Right.
Right. We want to provide that boundary in that direction.
And using the same analogy, it takes practice.
Yes.
Because you got to know how much how much push behind it that you have to have. How fast that it needs to be going to knock the pins down.
Right.
There's an end result.
Right.
By tossing the ball or rolling the ball down the alley, and that is you want to knock down pins. Well, the same thing goes with boundaries. I set this boundary because I know what the end result is going to be. Now, like I said, what happens is that when we have two we know this. I mean, we from our from psychology, we know that if you have too strict boundaries,
yes,
that people will one of two things. They'll not have enough confidence to go outside those boundaries,
believe in them,
or they'll rebel totally against the boundaries that are set against.
They overly believe in themselves.
Yes,
right,
and so what you have to do is you have to learn how to, as a parent, you have to learn how to help your child to know why the boundary is set.
So do you think that parenting in this manner with boundaries is conditional on the child, or do you think that there's a middle ground parents can take that brings both to center? There's
no one size fits all here, because you've got to know the personality of your child, because your child may get anxious over,
right,
something, anything. It doesn't matter. I've got an Anatolian Shepherd. If there's a trash can sitting out front, that's a different thing in her environment, and she goes nuts and starts barking at it. And I have to go and settle her down, and I have to say, you did a good job. You're a good guard dog. You are watching everything, because their instinct is to watch the flock and make sure that there's nothing different in the flock. Because if there's something different, and they can pick up on the anxiety of the flock, then they know that there's a predator close by. Well, we got a walker that walks down the street. She goes bananas. And I have to go and say, we don't bark at walkers, like she can understand what I'm saying.
Sure.
But the same thing goes with our kids. If they recognize what's in their environment, they know what's in their environment. And if there's something different in their environment, it can create anxiety for them. And if it's creating anxiety for them, you need to know that as a parent, not to keep it from their environment, but to help them to understand it's just something different in your environment and not something that's going to affect who you are. You just look at it and you just have the explanation. Yeah, there's a different car parked in the neighbor's driveway, and I know my grandson, he identifies everybody's car. I mean, he says Mimi's car. He says Papa's car. He says Daddy's truck, Mama's car, and I mean, so he's able to, and he's 26 months old, 27 months old. And so he's able to identify that already. So they know what's in their environment and what's going on in their environment. Now, when they know what's going on in their environment and something's different, creates anxiety. Well, back to, as a parent, you need to know that. And it's not anything devastating, but it is part of their personality, so that you can say to them and give them explanation. Because they have, I believe, I have found that when you give your child explanation, and I know I'm going to have to explain everything to my kid. I can hear parents saying that right now. Well, you have to have the wisdom to know what to say to your child, because you can ask them the question, well, what do you see different in your environment? What's taking place? You don't have to say, it's okay, this was in your, this is something new, and no, you just look at them, have them explain to you what's different. And then you say, how's that affect you? What's that? How's that make you feel? I know. As soon as that came out of my mouth, everybody that's listening is going, yeah, he's just a typical psychologist. But that's part of it. It's not that you have to look at them and go, well, how did that make you feel? I mean, you just say, you make it as a matter of fact as you possibly can, so.
Well, I think that, like you're saying, the point is to highlight so they can see it for themselves, so that as they get older, they learn to self-regulate rather than relying upon you to do it for them. And so when you question them, using those questions, not even just how you feel, what happened? Have them play it back. I mean, half the time kids go, I don't even know what happened. I don't even know why I did it. Like, help them play it back. Retell the story from the beginning. Why'd you decide to climb the tree?
I in my practice, and I dealt with a lot of kids in my practice, that was one of the areas that I felt like was a area of expertise for me. But when I dealt with kids, I would stay away from the why questions. Well, in my whole practice in particular, I would stay away from the why questions because it was incentive for my client to lie.
Storytelling.
Yeah, and because you would say, why did you do this? And they would say, I don't know. And the problem with I don't know is I'm avoiding telling you what I did or why I did that or what I was feeling because I don't want you to know.
Right.
Because you'll know more about me than I know about you, and that creates a problem.
What would you say then would be some great questions that parents can use to ask their child, these highlighting questions to help them start to question and think things for themselves? Like, what are questions parents can use to talk to their children instead of just asking the blanket why?
One of the things that I do is I kind of preface it. I noticed that you were walking with so-and-so when you came out of school. How close are you to them? What kind of relationship do you have with them? Well, they're just my friend, and so you kind of open with those, and it's like what you're doing is you're breaking down a barrier And these aren't boundaries. Okay. A barrier is not a boundary.
Yes.
You're breaking down a barrier that they don't want you to know about. They don't want you to know certain stuff. And so one of the things that they need to know is that they can trust you beyond a shadow of a doubt, so that when they share something with you, that it's only you that it's being shared with, and not even their other parent, So there's a thing about confidentiality and trust, and so asking questions, and you can't just get it out of them, whatever it is that they're dealing with. You can't just get it out of them first question. You have to build that trust with them and that confidentiality with them. And so I would say, questions to build that is that you make observations first. I noticed that. I saw that. I heard you all talking, because, if you're a parent and you're working out in the backyard and the kids are playing and they have all kinds of conversations between themselves. And when they have those conversations between themselves, you pick up a lot of information in those kinds of things. I do that when I'm teaching kids, in Sunday school or Wednesday night or whatever. I can hear them talking to each other, and I can hear them saying things to each other. And so one of the ways that I build that rapport is to be able to say, I heard you say, I heard this, about this situation. What's your take on it? What do you think about it? I know that, and it's not always, like my dad. You rode your bike on Sullivan Road today, didn't you? And no, it's not always that accusation, but it is.
I saw your tires.
Yeah, and
Tar.
I saw that you had tar on your bike tires, and that tells me that you were on Sullivan Road, and then that kind of breaks down the barrier, almost immediately. So what you're doing is you're looking for a way to break down the barrier, and just pointed questions one right after another doesn't break down the barrier. It just builds the barrier stronger, because they'd say, I've got something you want to know, and I'm not telling you, no matter how many questions you're going to ask me. And you get more frustrated and more frustrated. You look at them and you say, and this is, my kids would when they were little, they would give me a hard time. You're using that reverse psychology. And I would say, well, you'll tell me when you want to tell me. And then I turn around and walk away, because I kind of already know what the answer is to my questions. I just want to hear it from them. But I turn around and walk away. And that was real frustrating for my kids, because they would think that I was using reverse psychology. And I would just look at them and say, no, you'll tell me when you want to tell me. If you don't want to tell me, I understand that, because there are certain things that kids don't want to tell their parents because they're afraid that they'll think differently about them.
That's them setting a boundary.
Right. And so what you do is you have to say, there are no boundaries in our communication. If you have a problem, you need to come to me, because I'm going to be your support system. I'm going to be the experience that you need. I'm going to be the person that's still going to love you regardless of what you've done. And just helping your child know that.
Yeah.
And you know that about your parent, it gives you a freedom, also gives you a sense of confidence. We know that with God.
Empowerment, yeah.
We know that with God. And that gives us our sense of confidence that we can go to Him with our misgivings, our sin, the things that we've thought or said or done. We can go to Him and ask for His forgiveness, and He will do it. And then we can, it's not that we walk around guilt-free, because we have to deal with some of the consequences of our behavior.
Right.
There are just natural, logical consequences that come about from our behavior, and some of it is guilt and shame. And so we have to realize that, how to deal with the guilt and shame.
Yeah.
So
I cut my finger. I knew the moment I cut it, the moment I started bleeding,
I made a bad decision.
I made a bad decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
We all have that.
Yep, we do. We do.
So in our next episode, we'll talk about some ways to establish boundaries and what kind of boundaries that we can have. So we'll see you next time. Another podcast has come to an end, but you can listen to any of our podcasts streaming on YouTube, Spotify, and our website.